The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Stephen Curry's Bay Area home as he sat in his home office, scrolling through real estate listings on his laptop. It wasn't for himself this time. He had been quietly researching something far more personal for months. His fingers paused over a particular listing that made his heart skip a beat. 1247 Maple Street, Radford, Virginia. The modest two-story house with its wraparound porch and towering oak trees looked weathered but dignified, exactly as his mother Sonya had described it countless times during his childhood. Stephen leaned back in his leather chair, remembering those evening conversations when she would tell him stories about growing up in that very house, how she'd climb the old oak tree in the front yard, how her mother would call her in for dinner from that same porch, how she'd practice her own basketball shots against the garage door until the neighbors complained. "This is it," he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible in the quiet room. The house had been on the market for 3 weeks, according to the listing. The current owners, an elderly couple named the Hendersons, were downsizing after 40 years of marriage. Stephen's research had revealed they'd purchased it from Sonya's family back in 1982, when she was just 18, and heading off to Virginia Tech on a volleyball scholarship. Stephen picked up his phone and dialed his real estate agent, Marcus Thompson, who had helped him with several properties over the years. The phone rang twice before Marcus's familiar voice answered. "Steph, what can I do for you today?" "Marcus, I need you to look into a property for me. It's in Radford, Virginia. I'm sending you the listing now." Stephen's fingers moved quickly across his phone screen, forwarding the information. "Virginia? That's a bit outside our usual territory, but I've got connections out there. What's special about this one?" Stephen paused, looking out his window at the pristine lawn where his own children played. "It's where my mom grew up. I want to buy it for her." There was a moment of silence on the other end before Marcus spoke again, his tone noticeably softer. "That's beautiful, man. Let me make some calls. The market out there is different from the Bay Area, but I'll handle everything discreetly. Marcus, this needs to stay completely quiet. I don't want any media attention until after it's done. Can you make that happen?" "Absolutely. I'll use a trust and keep everything under wraps. How soon do you want to move on this?" Stephen looked at the calendar on his wall. His mother's birthday was 6 weeks away. "I want to close before Mom's birthday. This is going to be her gift." After ending the call, Stephen found himself staring at the photos of the house on his computer screen. He enlarged each image, studying every detail. The front porch where Sonya had spent countless summer evenings. The kitchen window where she'd watch for her father to come home from his job at the local factory. The small bedroom upstairs that had been hers throughout her teenage years. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, Aisha. "Kids want to know if you're coming to lunch soon. Riley made you a sandwich. Peanut butter and basketball-shaped pickles." Stephen smiled, typing back, "On my way. Tell Riley I can't wait to try her creation." But as he stood to leave his office, his eyes fell on a framed photo on his desk. A picture of him, Sonya, and his father Dell from his rookie year with the Warriors. His mother's smile in that photo was radiant, proud, full of the same warmth she'd always shown him through every step of his journey, from a skinny kid in Charlotte to an NBA champion. He thought about all the sacrifices she'd made, all the games she'd attended, all the late-night conversations when he doubted himself. She had been his anchor through everything, and now he had the opportunity to give her something that would connect her back to her own beginnings. Stephen picked up his phone one more time and called Marcus back. "Hey, it's me again. Whatever it takes to get that house, do it. Price isn't an issue. I want my mom to have her childhood home back." 3 weeks later, Stephen sat in a quiet corner booth at a small diner in downtown Radford, Virginia. He'd flown in under the radar, wearing a simple baseball cap and hoodie, blending in with the lunch crowd of locals and Virginia Tech students. Across from him sat Marcus Thompson and a local real estate agent named Patricia Williams, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a warm smile who had been handling the transaction. "The Hendersons are lovely people," Patricia was saying, sliding a folder across the table to Stephen. "When I explained that you wanted to purchase the home as a gift for someone with a personal connection to the property, They were quite moved. They've agreed to your offer. Stephen opened the folder, his eyes scanning the contract documents. The price was fair, $285,000 for the three-bedroom, two-bathroom house with its large yard and detached garage. In the Bay Area, it would barely buy a studio apartment, but here in rural Virginia, it represented a solid family home with decades of memories embedded in its walls. There's something else, Patricia continued. Mrs. Henderson mentioned that when they bought the house in 1982, the previous owners, that would be your mother's family, left some items in the basement. They've been storing them all these years, not sure what to do with them. Would you like to see what's there? Stephen's heart jumped. Absolutely. Can we go there now? The drive to Maple Street took only 10 minutes through Radford's tree-lined residential neighborhoods. As they pulled up to the house, Stephen felt a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. The oak tree in the front yard was even more magnificent than in the photos, its branches now reaching the second-story windows. The porch swing his mother had described was gone, but the hooks remained, rusty but solid. Mrs. Henderson, a silver-haired woman with a gentle demeanor, met them at the front door. Her husband Robert stood behind her, leaning on a walking cane but smiling warmly. "You must be Stephen," Mrs. Henderson said, extending her hand. "Patricia told us about your gift for your mother. What a wonderful thing to do." "Thank you for making this possible," Stephen replied, shaking both their hands. "This house means everything to her." As they walked through the rooms, Mrs. Henderson shared stories about their 4 decades in the home, how they'd raised 3 children there, hosted countless family gatherings, weathered storms both literal and metaphorical within those walls. Stephen listened politely, but his mind was picturing his mother as a young girl moving through these same spaces. The kitchen had been updated since the 1970s, but the layout remained the same. Stephen stood by the window his mother had described, looking out at the backyard where she'd helped her mother hang laundry on summer days. The hardwood floors creaked in the same places they probably had when Sonya was a child. "Now, let me show you what we found in the basement," Mr. Henderson said, leading them down a narrow staircase. In the corner of the basement, covered by an old tarp, sat several boxes and what appeared to be furniture. As Mr. Henderson pulled away the covering, Stephen's breath caught in his throat. There was a small wooden desk, child-sized, with Sonya carved into its surface in a young girl's handwriting. Boxes contained old school papers, report cards, and what appeared to be a collection of handwritten letters. "We always meant to try to track down the family," Mrs. Henderson explained, "but life got busy, and we weren't sure how to go about it." Stephen knelt beside the boxes, his hands trembling slightly as he opened one. Inside were elementary school assignments with Sonya Adams, written in the upper right corner, his mother's maiden name. There were art projects, essays about her dreams for the future, and a small notebook filled with what appeared to be poetry, written in a teenage hand. One poem, dated from 1981, caught his attention. "Someday I'll have children of my own, who'll dream bigger than this small-town home. I'll teach them to reach for every star and show them they can travel far. But I'll never forget this place so dear, where love and dreams first grew here." Stephen had to pause, emotion welling up in his chest. Here was his mother at 17, writing about the children she hoped to have someday, dreaming of the lessons she wanted to teach them. He was living proof of those dreams realized. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson," Stephen said, standing up slowly, "would it be possible for me to come back in a couple of weeks to pick up these items? I'd like to have the house ready as a complete surprise." "Of course, dear," Mrs. Henderson replied. "We'll have everything ready for you." As they prepared to leave, Stephen had one more request. "Patricia, I want to hire someone to restore this place exactly as it was in the late 1970s. I have photos my mom has shared, and I want every detail to be perfect. Can you recommend someone?" "I know just the person," Patricia smiled. "My brother runs a restoration company here in town. He specializes in bringing old homes back to their original character." Walking back to his rental car, Stephen felt the weight of what he was about to do. This wasn't just buying a house. He was about to give his mother a piece of her past, a connection to the girl she used to be, and a tangible reminder of where her own dreams of motherhood had first taken root. He pulled out his phone and called Aisha. "How did it go?" Her voice was warm and encouraging. "Better than I imagined," Stephen replied, looking back at the house one more time. "I found some of her old things, Aisha. Poems she wrote. About wanting to be a mother someday. About the children she hoped to raise." There was a pause before Aisha spoke, her voice soft with emotion. "She's going to cry, you know. Happy tears, but she's going to completely lose it." Stephen smiled, getting into his car. "I'm counting on it." 2 weeks before Sonia's birthday, Stephen found himself back in Radford, this time accompanied by his father Dell and his brother Seth. The three Curry men stood on Maple Street, watching as workers put the finishing touches on what had become a labor of love for the entire restoration team. Danny Williams, Patricia's brother, had thrown himself into the project with the passion of someone who understood they were working on something special. Over the past month, his team had painstakingly restored the house to match the photographs Stephen had provided, pictures his mother had shared over the years, showing the home as it looked during her childhood in the late 1970s. The exterior had been repainted in its original cream color with forest green shutters. The wraparound porch had been rebuilt to exact specifications, complete with a new porch swing positioned precisely where Sonya remembered it. The oak tree, already magnificent, had been professionally maintained to ensure its health for decades to come. "It looks exactly like the pictures Mom used to show us," Seth said, shaking his head in amazement. "Down to the color of the front door." Dell, who had been quieter than usual during the trip, walked slowly up the front steps. At 61, he moved with the careful deliberation of a former athlete whose body had absorbed decades of professional basketball, but his eyes were bright with emotion. "Your mother is going to be speechless," he said to Stephen. "In 40 years of marriage, I've never seen her as surprised as she's going to be." Inside, the transformation was even more remarkable. The kitchen had been restored with period-appropriate appliances and fixtures, but modern functionality had been preserved. The hardwood floors had been refinished to their original warm honey color. In the living room, furniture similar to what the Addams family had owned, sourced from estate sales and vintage shops throughout Virginia, had been carefully arranged. But it was upstairs in Sonia's childhood bedroom where the restoration team had truly outdone themselves. Using a detailed description she had once given Stephen about her teenage sanctuary, they had recreated the space down to the smallest detail. The walls were painted the same soft lavender she had chosen for her 16th birthday. A vintage writing desk, not the original, but one from the same era, sat by the window where she used to do her homework. Even the curtains matched the floral pattern she had described. "Mr. Curry," Danny Williams approached Stephen, holding a small wooden box. "We found this tucked behind a loose board in the bedroom closet. Thought you might want to include it with the other items." Stephen opened the box to find a collection of small mementos: a pressed flower, a ticket stub from a high school basketball game, a small silver locket, and a folded piece of paper. He carefully unfolded the paper to reveal a handwritten letter, dated June 1980. "Dear future me, I'm 16 today, and I'm hiding this letter in my room for you to find someday. I hope by the time you read this, you've done all the things you're dreaming about now. I hope you went to college like Daddy wants. I hope you fell in love with someone who makes you laugh every day. I hope you have babies who think you're the best mom in the world. I hope you never forget this room, this house, this feeling of believing anything is possible. Love, Sonya, age 16. Stephen had to sit down on the bed, the letter trembling in his hands. His father and brother moved closer, reading over his shoulder. "She wrote this to herself," Stephen whispered. "She was 16, dreaming about her future, and she hid this letter in her room." Dell placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "And now you're giving her the chance to answer that letter in person." The next few hours were spent arranging the basement items that the Hendersons had preserved. The small desk with Sonia's name carved into it was placed in the bedroom. Her old school papers and report cards were organized in albums. The collection of poetry she had written was carefully preserved in protective sleeves. As the sun began to set over Radford, the three men stood in the front yard looking at their completed project. The house glowed with warm light from within, every window revealing spaces filled with love and careful attention to detail. "How are we going to get her here without her getting suspicious?" Seth asked. Stephen smiled, pulling out his phone to show them a text conversation with his sister Sidel. "She thinks she's coming to Virginia for a family reunion at Virginia Tech. We told her the university wants to honor her volleyball career and that we're all flying in to surprise her." "And she bought that?" Dell asked, raising an eyebrow. "Mom's always been trusting when it comes to family surprises," Stephen laughed. "Besides, Sidel's been feeding her just enough details to keep the story believable." As they locked up the house and prepared to head back to their hotel, Stephen took one last look at the home. Tomorrow his mother would walk through that front door and step back into her childhood. She would see the room where she had dreamed of becoming a mother, read the letter she had written to her future self, and understand that every hope she had written down at 16 had not just come true, it had exceeded her wildest dreams. His phone buzzed with a text from Aisha. "Kids are so excited they can barely sleep. Riley keeps asking if Grandma Sonya is going to cry happy tears. I told her probably." Stephen typed back, "Tell Riley that Grandma is going to cry the happiest tears she's ever cried." As they drove away from Maple Street, Stephen felt a profound sense of completion. This wasn't just a gift, it was a bridge between past and present, a way of telling his mother that her childhood dreams mattered, that the girl she had been was just as important as the woman she had become. Tomorrow, Sonya Curry would come home. The morning of Sonya's birthday dawned crisp and clear in Radford, Virginia. Stephen stood on the front porch of 1247 Maple Street at 9 a.m., his hands shaking slightly as he checked his phone for the third time in 5 minutes. Dell, Seth, and Sidel were in position around the corner, ready to bring Sonya to the house under the pretense of showing her an interesting stop on their way to the supposed Virginia Tech ceremony. The restoration was complete, every detail perfect. Fresh flowers, the same variety his mother had always loved, filled vases throughout the house. The basement treasures were arranged exactly as Stephen wanted them. In the living room, a large envelope sat on the coffee table containing the deed to the house and a letter Stephen had written to his mother. At 9:23 a.m., Stephen heard the familiar sound of his father's rental car turning onto Maple Street. His heart began to race as he stepped to the side of the porch, out of immediate view but still able to see his mother's reaction through the front window. The car pulled into the driveway, and Stephen could see his mother in the passenger seat, looking curiously at the house. Even from a distance he could see the exact moment recognition dawned on her face. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she turned to look at Dell with wide, disbelieving eyes. "This can't be," her voice carried through the car window as Dell parked and turned off the engine. Sidel, who was sitting in the back seat with Seth, was recording everything on her phone. "Mom, why don't you go take a closer look at the house?" Sonya stepped out of the car slowly, as if in a dream. She was wearing a simple blue dress, Stephen's favorite color on her, and her hair was styled the way she always wore it for special occasions. At 57, she moved with the grace of someone who had been an athlete, but there was a vulnerability in her steps as she approached the house of her childhood. Stephen watched from his hiding spot as his mother stood at the bottom of the porch steps, her eyes scanning every detail of the restored exterior. She reached out to touch the railing, then looked up at the oak tree that had grown so much taller since she was a girl. "It looks exactly the same," she whispered, loud enough for Stephen to hear. "How is this possible?" Dell walked up beside her, his own eyes moist with emotion. "Why don't you go look inside?" Sonya turned the doorknob. Stephen had left it unlocked and stepped into the front hallway. Stephen moved to the living room window where he could see her clearly. His mother stood frozen in the entryway, taking in the restored interior that matched her memories so perfectly. She walked slowly into the living room, her fingers trailing along the furniture, touching the walls, absorbing every detail. When she saw the envelope on the coffee table with her name written in Stephen's handwriting, she picked it up with trembling hands. Stephen knew this was his moment. He walked through the front door, his footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. "Happy birthday, Mom." Sonya spun around, the envelope still clutched in. her hands, tears already streaming down her face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She looked at him, then at the house around them, then back at him, trying to process what was happening. "Stephen," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What did you do?" "I bought your house, Mom. Your childhood home. It's yours now." The envelope fell from her hands as she collapsed into the nearest chair, overwhelmed by emotion. Stephen rushed to her side, kneeling down and taking her hands in his. "I don't understand," she managed between sobs. "How? Why?" "Because you gave me everything," Stephen said, his own voice thick with emotion. "Every dream I ever achieved started with the love you showed me in this house, in your stories about growing up here. I wanted to give you back the place where you first dreamed of being a mother." By now, Del, Seth, and Sidel had entered the house, all of them crying as they watched the reunion between mother and son. Sidel continued recording, knowing this moment would be treasured by their family forever. Sonya stood up, still holding Stephen's hands, and looked around the room with wonder. "It's exactly like I remember. The colors, the furniture, even the way the light comes through the windows." "Wait until you see your room," Stephen said softly. He led her upstairs, the rest of the family following quietly behind. When Sonya reached the doorway of her childhood bedroom, she gasped audibly. The lavender walls, the writing desk by the window, the carefully chosen furniture. It was all exactly as she had described it to Stephen years ago. But it was when she saw the small wooden desk with her name carved into it that she completely broke down. She ran her fingers over the carved letters, remembering the day she had made them with her father's pocket knife. "My desk," she whispered. "I can't believe you found my desk." Stephen walked to the desk and opened the small drawer, pulling out the letter she had written to herself at 16. "You left something for yourself, Mom. I think it's time you read it." Sonya took the letter with shaking hands and read it silently, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. The rest of the family watched in respectful silence as she absorbed the words her teenage self had written decades ago. "I was 16 when I wrote this," she said finally, looking up at Stephen. "I was sitting right here, dreaming about having children who would think I was the best mom in the world." She laughed through her tears. "I guess that dream came true." "More than came true, Mom," Seth said from the doorway. "You became the mom we all aspired to be like for our own kids." The next hour was spent touring every room of the house, with Sonya sharing memories and stories with each space they visited. In the kitchen, she showed them where she used to help her mother cook Sunday dinners. In the basement, she went through all the preserved items, marveling at school papers she had written and photographs she thought were lost forever. As the family gathered in the living room, Sonya picked up the envelope Stephen had left for her on the coffee table. Inside was the deed to the house, officially transferring ownership to her, and a letter from Stephen. She read the letter aloud to the family. "Dear Mom, this house is where you first learned to dream, where you wrote poetry about the children you hope to have someday, where you discovered that love makes a house a home. Every value you learned in these rooms, you passed on to us. Every dream you dreamed here, you helped us achieve. You gave me the confidence to believe I could make it to the NBA. You taught me that success means nothing without family. You showed me that real strength comes from lifting others up. This house shaped the woman who shaped me. Now it's yours again. Forever. All my love, Stephen." When she finished reading, Sonya looked around the room at her family. Her husband of 40 years, her 3 children who had all grown up to be successful, loving people. And she understood that the 16-year-old girl who had written that letter to her future self had gotten everything she had asked for, and more. "I need to call my mother," Sonya said suddenly, referring to Stephen's grandmother who was now 82 and living in a retirement community in Charlotte. "She needs to know we have the house back." As Sonya made the call, explaining through tears and laughter to her mother what Stephen had done, Del pulled his eldest son aside. "Son, I've watched you accomplish incredible things on the basketball court, but this is the most beautiful thing you've ever done." Stephen looked around the living room where his mother was now video calling his grandmother, showing her every room through the phone screen, her joy infectious and pure. "Dad, Everything I am started in this house, in Mom's stories about growing up here. I just wanted to give her back the beginning of her story. Later that evening, as the family sat on the front porch watching the sunset through the branches of the old oak tree, Sonya turned to Stephen with a peaceful smile. "You know what the most amazing part of this is?" she asked. "What's that, Mom?" "That 16-year-old girl who wrote that letter never could have imagined that one of her children would grow up to buy back her childhood home. She dreamed of being a good mother, but she never dreamed her children would love her enough to give her back her past." Stephen reached over and took his mother's hand. "She did more than dream of being a good mother, Mom. She dreamed of raising children who would reach for the stars. And then she spent her whole life making sure we knew how to fly." As darkness settled over Radford, Virginia, the Curry family sat together on the porch where Sonya had spent countless evenings as a child, now creating new memories in the place where her own story had begun. The house that had once sheltered her dreams was now a testament to how beautifully those dreams had come true.